Hey folks, Ash here, allthingsdentistry.com, and a student messaged me, emailed me, and asked me a few questions about the G11. They said that they had a G11 camera. They don't have the macro lens yet. This is a macro lens from PhotoMed, and sort of some of the tips about using this camera. And I'm a basic, if that, amateur. But with that being said, I do use it every day, strapped to my back, and I look like a tourist around the building. We all typically do. However, I've come to really appreciate the benefits of this camera. I've also come to understand the limitations. So I'll quickly go over that. Now, I just was fooling around. Actually, the question got me to pull out the good old child scribbled manual, and a few of the dials that I've been using. So I'm going to try. The young person said that they didn't have the macro lens. And I can understand that. I mean, it's almost $1,000 for that macro lens. So let's try doing a few things. Let me show you what I do without the macro lens. So the typical buttons that I'm using are on this dial. And this gives me a wide range of C1, C2 are settings where you can save. SCN is where you can adjust whether it's portrait, landscape, different types of photographs like that. And then AV is another setting, and we'll talk about using the macro lens with that. And program is where I think you might actually be able to get away with using this for some intraoral photography, just using the macro setting on the camera itself. So let me go to when I first see a patient. I'll set to portrait in the SCN. So, and then I'll make sure this is set to portrait. Oh man, there we go. And also, I'm not going to put it on auto, I'm going to put it on flash. And that just seems to, when we put them in front of, put the patient in front of a black or blue background, that gives me a nice, just a nice photo for presentation. We do lots of presentations. I keep the ISO to approximately 80. You could probably put it on auto. I just, in the building with the lighting we have, I just find that 80 is what works best. And I set the exposure to maybe, anywhere between 1 and 0. And I use a different exposure depending on where I am in the oral cavity, whether it be a more posterior distal buccal shot that I'm trying to get. I'll maybe increase the exposure. And a mentor, an oral surgery mentor, said the key to good photos is lots, and I tend to believe that. So this will be the setting that I typically use for a portrait. Essentially that we've got to SCN to portrait. I got my flash on, ISO set to 80, and just under 1. And go ahead and take the photo flashes, and we get actually get a decent photo. So intraoral, I'll show you with the right now with the macro lens. The PhotoMed gentleman taught me on the phone real quick about some of the neat settings. So initially, when you get the camera, we'll set it to AV, set the ISO to 80. You can set this as 0. And some of the things that I have set, we'll go into menu, and just some of the settings I have here. Let's see if I can get this. There's no face. The autofocus frame is on. The autofocus point zoom is a technique that I use, and it gives you a little square. I'll show you that in a second. And autofocus assist beam is on. And after I set all my little settings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this into one of those C1 programs. And the reason why is that when I first started using this is what happened every time. I would come to use the camera and everything, I would get that, and it would be very disruptive to the flow of taking photos, and then you're standing there for 10 minutes trying to figure out how to work a camera. So what I would typically do, what I was shown was to use C1. And what I mean by that, I'll take this, I'll go back to AV, I'll set up all my menu items I want. I'll set my f-stop to 8, and then what I'll do is I'll go back to menu, go to save settings, and then I'll put it in C1 or C2. You can actually also save zoom settings into C1 or C2. So that's become advantageous in this setting where I'll just go to C1. This is how I normally set up my camera in the morning. I'll just come in ISO 80, C1, and just over 0, and that's it. And what happens is it automatically zooms into the setting that I have. My f-stop is at 80, and I typically I won't use an overhead light because the way I've got it set. Let's see if I can get this in a shot. And what I'll do, let's see, I'll go into focus. So you see there's that little autofocus. Let me pull back. So I'll go in. You see the little yellow will come up. That means it's not in focus. So I'll have to gauge it and then wait for that to show up, in and out, and take a photo. Now, the true connoisseur of photography would not be using display. They'd be using histogram and making sure that these little bars are in a specific region. And you know, for the photography that I use, the presentations, I'm actually really happy with not using that. And if I go to C2, you'll watch it change. It's another setting, and I've just set the zoom for a little closer up. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was if you don't have the macro lens, and I totally understand that. I'm not even sure if I had food during dental school. Was probably set it to P, maybe set ISO to 80, and let's go in. It's back on, and we'll set to macro. And I think you may be able to accomplish something similar. Let's get this rubber dam out of the way. I'm sure there's some folks out there that will be able to really show you how to use macro, the macro setting on the camera. I'm sure you probably can get a decent result. That's not bad, actually. Let's try one more time. Right on this guy here. I mean, not a bad result. No macro lens. So it is, and then my other resident colleague uses this around as his regular camera. So fairly functional. Again, I'm an amateur. I just use it a lot. So I'm not a race car driver, but I drive a car every day. So I know how to drive a little bit. So I hope that helps. Let me know what you think. Cheers.